Welcome to issue 253 of Critical Encounters, a podcast about Marvel Champions, a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. Here we take a look at the most critical piece of the game, the counter sets. We'll discuss those poorly understood characters, unfairly labeled villains, and their various plans to shape humanity and benefit the planet, as well as those so-called heroes intent on thwarting them. I'm one of your hosts, Joey Vazquez, and joining me tonight is Steve.
Hello.
And Daniel.
Joey, what a delight to have you. Welcome to our lair.
Thank you. I am very happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have Joey on. That's a new voice everybody's hearing. Joey Vazquez? Say your last name for me again? I'm terrible at this.
Vazquez.
Vazquez. All right, Joey Vazquez. And Joey is an artist who works on Marvel Champions. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for reading the intro. Thanks for being here. Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to say that a couple times.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate you guys bringing me on. And yeah, let's have fun and talking about all things Marvel Champions and the fun art stuff. So always down for that. Before we get to that, Daniel, what's on your mind?
Oh, Joey, I'm delighted that you asked. So lately, I would say for maybe the last month or so, maybe a little bit more, I've been diving deeper and deeper into a pit of despair at what I think of as almost the obsolescence of humanity, Joey.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Let me explain.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, let me explain. So I'm really delighted that you're here, Joey, because I think if anyone can lift me free of this, it will be someone who does real art. So my brother showed me this website that will basically make AI music for you. So I've been writing songs for a long time and performing them and all that kind of stuff. But then I got down this rabbit hole of like just putting my lyrics up on this thing that then just makes songs out of it. Mm-hmm. And the songs are great and they're going to be hits. and then I realized that at some point in that artistic process, the me behind all that stuff just didn't even matter at all, really. I was words on a page that I had written decades ago, and what came out, it started as sort of like a kind of a funny little experiment, and like, well, what would happen if this? And then I started really liking what it produced, and it felt like it was better than anything I ever could perform anymore. And so I just kind of went, I'm like, this, I haven't like stopped. I just keep pumping more songs into this thing, but which just, it's weird. It's like the addiction I know is destroying me kind of thing. So AI has like, taken me over in one of my creative sides of my life, and it's freaking me out. And so, yeah, someone who is a creative person and who performs the art and creates that without, I'm going to thank you for being here.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, as cool as the things that AI can create, it's more enjoyable when it's actually, it's yours.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the more I do it, the more I see the patterns it employs, and so like things get samey over time. It's been interesting to see and kind of be a part of on the inside/outside of my own life. So so cool. Thanks for being here. And I would be remiss too, Steve, if I didn't also remind listeners that we have a contest going on.
We do, an apocalyptic contest, so it goes with your despair. Yeah. Don't forget, folks, the Age of Apocalypse campaign box contest is still going. Check our socials or the show notes for the link. Answer the survey questions and be entered to win in the drawing. So, and I don't believe that box has any AI art or any art from Joey, so maybe we should talk about art from Joey. How's that sound?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with that. People want to know, who is Joey Vazquez? If I said it right. I probably said it wrong again. Sorry.
No worries. People tend to, they say like Quez, and it's like, in like in Spanish, like Q's kind of sound like K, so it's like Vasquez. So okay. Yeah, Yeah, it's
I'm
like
just gonna call
it's a
you
little.
Joey from here on out. That one I
No
can
worries.
do. I'm terrible. I should know better. My last name is terrible. Everyone pronounces it wrong as well. But um,
No worries.
let's find out who you are. What would you say you do for Marvel Champions? Who are you? Give us your life story in 30 seconds or less. Uh,
I'm Joey. I'm artist for, let's see, lots of Marvel stuff. I've done stuff for the comics. I've done stuff for the games, or well, for the card games and such. I've done stuff for some shows. If you guys know, more recently over the past few years, I worked on the Marvel Studios What If show.
oh, I was just
Um,
watching that right before we
so
started.
so
Season 3.
so yep, I worked on seasons 2 and 3 of that. Um, I also worked on the new Spider-Man show that's coming out um in the next, actually this month. That comes out this
Yeah.
month. And then I also worked on the Marvel Zombies show, which comes out later this year. I don't remember when. I'll have to find those dates. But as you also know, I've done a number of expansions for the Marvel Champions game. I did Sinister Motives. I did, I think, the Infinite. Oh, what is
You
it?
did Mad Titan's Shadow, I believe.
The Infinity
Right?
Gauntlet. Yeah, yep.
Yes.
I did some cards for the Mutant Genesis stuff, I think. And then I also did the Mojo Madness little expansion, I think. And
Some
then
Guardians work, it looks like.
yep, the
Yep.
Guardians of the Galaxy one. Yep, that was my first main big expansion that I did. And then more recently, I can't say what cards I've done, but I can say that I've done some Star Wars cards for the Star Wars Unlimited game.
Oh, cool. Nice.
So I've gotten to work across Fantasy Flight on multiple capacities there, and so yeah, I've been doing that, and then I've also done a few things on Amazing Spider-Man for Marvel Comics. I recently drew a JSA issue for DC Comics, and I've done some covers for Skybound for their Transformers. What is it? Void Rivals book, and then a number of other like indie stuff kind of across the way, but mainly I've been primarily Marvel based for the majority of the stuff that I've done. And then oh, what else?
We have a full-fledged Marvel celebrity here with us tonight.
Like
I,
unbelievable. First off, you're clearly
Right.
very busy. And how long you been in this world, Joey?
so I started drawing comics when I was like 16 years old. So I was drawing very like indie stuff for other people. I had book that came out years ago, probably like around like 2010, that was called The Lost Kids. And that was like my first real published work. And then my way I kind of got into Marvel initially was I got hired to do licensing art for them. So that was my first real ever actual Marvel work. I drew like some Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange licensing art pieces. I colored some pieces for some other people. So like, you know, part of the process of drawing is like, you draw ink and color things, and some people don't do all three of those. But as I grew into learning a lot of my new skills, like I wanted to learn multiple disciplines. So by doing that, though, that's how I was able to get into doing character design and all that stuff, because I was
Awesome.
actually coloring everything.
Joey, what does licensing work mean?
Licensing work basically means like, so if you see comic looking artwork that's like on a t-shirt or on any kind of product that's outside of the comics, that's typically licensing work, like on a
Okay.
hat or on
Consumer
shoes
something.
or action figure box art or something. That's usually it's anything that's usually outside of the comics as a licensing artwork.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you said you do the drawing, the ink, and the coloring? So
Yes.
start to finish the whole thing?
Yep.
Okay. I've seen some parts where it says like penciled by or colorist, but you could end up being all three.
Yep. Yep. For the majority of the stuff that I do, it's all me. But like for stuff that's like actually in the comic books, because of the deadlines and stuff, usually other people handle the coloring duties, because it would just take me a little bit longer than needed. But typically, places like Marvel and such, they all let me color my covers at least because that's one piece that I can fully cover. You know. So.
I see. Yeah.
You were drawing comics at a young age, and then how does that, let's call it a passion early on, translate into like full-fledged career? I mean, is this all you do is Marvel art and other comic art, or do you have like a day job you have to drudgingly go off to like Daniel and I?
No, I was fortunate enough to where I have been able to make a steady living primarily all from my artwork. I have not had to get a side day job or anything like that, and I'm very grateful that I'm able to do something that I enjoy from a very early age. I would say, like, school was just not my thing. I I was not like I was not super great at it. It wasn't that I was getting like terrible grades or anything. Like it just like going to college and doing all that other, higher education stuff, it wasn't where I wanted to be. I already knew what I wanted, and it was kind of like ever since I saw Spider-Man. So I don't know if you guys like had played like the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man game like from forever ago back in like 2000. But that game kind of heavily got me into Spider-Man, and like the thing that kind of inspired me to draw was my mom got me the Spider-Man like encyclopedia book, the big DK Spider-Man book. I don't know if you remember those books that came out from DK that were like those big books that they had like X-Men and they had
Like
Hulk.
the encyclopedias and stuff?
Yep. And they had all these awesome drawings of Spider-Man and his villains and everything in there. And so my mom got that for my brother and I when I was like 7 or 8 or so, and that kind of got me hooked on Spider-Man. And then uh, the comic that got me fully hooked into Spider-Man, oddly enough, was not a Spider-Man comic at all. It was the Venom Lethal Protector #1, but it featured Spider-Man and it had some of the coolest poses of Spider-Man from the artist Mark Bagley who did that book. And after that, I was just like, "Yep, this is what I want to do."
Nice.
See, Steve, I told you he'd lift me out of my pit of despair.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Happy to help.
That is an inspiring origin story, Joey. Thank you.
Oh yeah, and it continues. It's ever unfolding. Whatever next opportunities, we'll see what happens down the line.
Now, do artists like you, Joey, and like I don't know if Marvel movies, if they like storyboard and things like that, is that something like artists like you that have been so deeply involved in Marvel stuff would do, or do they not really do that anymore, like traditional movies?
They definitely do storyboard.
Okay.
Every episode that we worked on for What If, we were shown an animatic of storyboards before, and I almost got into storyboarding back in like 2018 or 2019. One of my buddies had talked about coming out and working on the Disney XD Spider-Man show that was being done at the time, and I was not ready to move and leave everything behind to go head out to California, and so I had to graciously decline. But it was something where it was like it was a cool gig, but what's funny is like out of the interesting blessings in disguise of the pandemic was like Marvel Studios was hiring people all outside of the studio
Right.
because they had like a slew of new shows they were making. So the only kind of reason was able to get in was because everybody was already working from home and I guess they saw my Spider-Man work and they were like, "Hey, want to work on this new Spider-Man show?" And I was like, "Yay, a second chance." So, so then I got hired that way. But as far as like storyboarding and everything, yeah, a number of my buddies do storyboarding. I have a buddy who's a director, or two buddies who are directors at DreamWorks, who do a lot of storyboarding, and they're really great at it. They've got a lot of cool know-how when it comes to like telling a story cinematically and everything. So it's a very different practice, but it's similar to comic books, but you know your framing and different things are way more catered towards like you know film and animation and such. Whereas comic books, you're making still frames and you're having to still
Sure.
convey movement. Um, and there's a number of comic artists I know who worked in storyboarding who like are still in comics, but I don't know if you guys know who Phil Hester is, but he's kind of a mentor to me when I was first getting into comics and everything. And I believe he told me he worked on the New Adventures of Batman, the animated series, and he also worked on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, I believe. So that was probably a while ago, but but yeah.
Fantastic.
So it sounds like Spider-Man's your guy.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, is he your favorite hero / like subject to draw for comics?
Oh yeah,
Or
yeah. Spider-Man. If you saw my studio right now, you would be like, this guy likes Spider-Man a little bit. I have a Spider-Man coffee mug right next to me, next underneath my Spider-Man mouse pad, next to all my Spider-Man statues that are all over my desk, that are surrounded by all my Spider-Man in-box action figures that are all mounted on the wall. And I have what is it? I have a Spider-Man AirPods case here. I've got what is it? A few Spider-Man hot toys. I have a Spider-Man hoodie somewhere over here. He's everywhere in the studio. Uh and
I love that.
I have a life-size Spider-Man standee thing. What is it? Full figure, like the one that is of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man from the first Spider-Man movie.
oh wow,
So I have that. I have in one of my other rooms a whole wall slash full shelf full of like near every single Spider-Man pop figure. So I've been collecting those for a while. So yeah, it's Spider-Man all day over here. So
I think the only Spider-Man thing we have here in our secret lair are the bounty wanted posters.
oh yeah,
We,
nice.
he's one of our favorite heroes to watch get just beat up by like the
Oh
Sinister
yeah,
Six or whatever. So yeah,
oh yeah.
we have a
Peter goes
different
through
view
a
of
lot of stuff.
Spider-Man here from this side.
Oh yeah, Pete goes through a lot of suffering. That's what makes him Spider-Man, though. He wouldn't be Spider-Man without having to deal with all the hardships that come with that, the great power and responsibility, and all that nonsense. You know, I just wanted his powers. I was like, I don't want any of the responsibility. I want to have Spider-Man's powers.
So when you draw Spider-Man, do you have a favorite villain you like to pit him against? Because you can't just draw Spider-Man, right? He's got to be fighting somebody.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Venom for sure. Venom
Venom. Okay.
is my other favorite. He's I've got multiple figures of him actually up here on the shelves around here near me too. Venom is really fun. Carnage as well. I would say um who's another fun Spider-Man villain?
Do you have any pieces of Spider-Man with the Venom symbiote suit that you've done? Have you managed to combine
Yes,
the two?
I actually did a cover for Spider-Man. Actually, I can drop it here. Well, it's on ArtStation, but I can drop it here in the chat. Um,
The
of the Spider-Man in the symbiote suit with Kraven the Hunter. So
oh yeah, that looks great.
yeah, as soon as they asked me to draw symbiote suit, I
Oh
was just
wow.
like, yes.
Yeah, that's a nice looking cover. We'll drop that in our show notes for folks.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
okay,
That's great.
Spider-Man, Venom. Um,
I do love Mysterio as well. Mysterio's fun.
okay.
And then who's another? I mean, obviously, like Doc Ock and the Green Goblin are great ones. Um, not
And
really. Oh, go ahead, Jen, sorry.
I was gonna say I see you have some art that you've done of like Miss Marvel. We like her here.
Oh yeah.
She's got in the game. She's a lot of fun, so we enjoy that.
Mhm.
So you get to do a bunch of different subject matter. It sounds like, and that just seems so cool
Mhm.
to me. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, I actually worked on a few issues of Miss Marvel as well. So I didn't initially have a whole lot of knowledge about her or anything, and she wasn't really a character I like had any real affinity for. And then when I actually worked on her in her comic, and you know, different artists try to make like a character feel like their own, and so I very much enjoyed drawing her and trying to make her like draw a version of her that was very much like in my style and really stood out among like all the other artists who drew her. And so she was a fun character to draw.
So, Joey, how would you describe your style in amongst your peers? Right, like in the comic book artist world, the comic artist world. What would you say is your thing, your way of doing things that might separate you from other comic artists?
Hmm. That is a great question, and sometimes I feel like I question that myself. I'm like, what is the thing that makes my stuff stand out versus like, because you have so many different styles out there. I feel like sometimes my style it's like an amalgamation of, I mean, most styles are like an amalgamation of like all your favorite artists and such, and I would say my style, I would like to say, is very exaggerated and kind of graphic.
Mm,
I very much like cool, bold graphic shapes. I like kind of more bulky anatomy and such, and very expressive characters. And I kind of would liken it to, there's a lot of kinetic energy is how I would say is my style. I like things that are in a lot of movement, and in a way, it kind of feels like graphic design. I like something that like really stands out, like from afar. So like big, bold figures. I like kind of more chiseled edges and such, very graphic shapes. And I try to be very conscious of that whenever I'm drawing something because um, sometimes, like if you're looking at stuff like from a phone or from like afar, and you're drawing something, you now kind of have to be conscious of like, is somebody going to be able to tell what this is from a distance or from a small phone screen?
Or
So
or on a little tiny playing card.
or on a little tiny playing card. And so that's something that I try to take very much into account. So I would say, um, it sounds weird, like edgy and graphic, but like more in terms of like the edges of like the characters. They're like more chiseled and such. They've got either smooth or sharp edges.
yeah, I'm
And so
looking
yeah.
at the face of Sam Alexander, um,
Mhm.
and I see that kind of like the way you made his face is kind of like your faces.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of them have that kind of it's a really interesting quality, exactly like you're describing it, sort of bold lines, edged, and it's just yeah, really neat. Like Miles Morales kind of shares that as well, and James Rhodes.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, the recent X-Men,
it's
like you did the
yeah,
Wolverine, Cyclops, Phoenix, and Colossus cards, and the style you described, your style clearly shines on those hero cards.
Thank you
Looking at
very
those four
much.
characters, so especially Colossus, like he's got these huge muscles, but it's this strong shapes. It's really cool.
Thank you very much. That's one of my favorite cards. I had a ton of fun on that. And if you scroll through, you'll kind of see like the thumbnail process that I did to kind of get to that point. And I had a version where he was already cross-armed like that, and then I had another version where where he kind of has his hands out like stopping the bullets.
Hmm.
Um,
mm,
but then I kind of went back in, and something that I like to do that, is a part of the process is, even though it doesn't really look like a photo, I take a photo reference of myself just to kind of make sure that it matches in like the proportions of certain things. But then I obviously push it and exaggerate it a little bit more. But it's more so to get like the pose nailed down. So I think the final one came out much better than my initial first sketch.
Yeah, he's great. Um, so folks can go out to your art station. I'll put those links in there, and if you click on the Colossus art, you can scroll down and see what he was talking about. Like you can look at the different sketches and pieces. Um, I that brings me one of the questions I wanted to ask. When working for FFG, making a card for right? Making Colossus or Wolverine or whoever it might be, Nebula. There's a bunch of different pieces. What's the process that you work through from FFG? Do they just say, "Give me a Colossus character," or do you get some direction? I know that we've heard the developers say they write these little art briefs before, but we always only hear it from one side. What's
Right.
it like on your end of it, getting these pieces of art that you got to make for these little cards?
Yeah, it's basically so when we're starting a set of cards, we'll get a full description of what it is they want for the card. And so like for example, like like you just mentioned, like the Nebula piece is, there's one where there's Nebula fighting Gamora on a planet or like on the like near a temple or something. And they'll just kind of give a description of like the mood that they want, and like if it's like ferocity, we want like this to be a fierce fight, we want it to like look like, they kind of always add a mood word to kind of
Okay.
emphasize like what the feel they want to convey in the
Okay.
card.
Cool.
So they do give us kind of detailed descriptions, but they also do let us be creative with those cards. uh and it's always fun, like for example, like the Cyclops, like Cyclops shooting his his unibeam or from his eyes or whatever, shooting his lasers, or Wolverine popping his claws and just looking epic. And sometimes there's simple descriptions, and sometimes if it's like a scenario based card, we kind of have something more specific that kind of needs to be translated to make sure it's emphasizing the action of certain cards. And if it's a character card, sometimes we get a little bit more freedom to do whatever we want with something. But there are usually little quick descriptions, and then after we get the description, we'll go into the thumbnailing phase of like doing a quick sketch of what we think they might want. My process is I typically try to do an idealized thumbnail sketch. And for people who don't know who thumbnail sketches are or what thumbnail sketches are, that's the initial sketch that you do to just kind of get the idea out. It's not the perfect version. It's just, mainly to show them like, here's the idea of what this final card is going to look like. And so once we do that, we send that in. They'll go through a number of people to fully approve it. And then once that's approved, we move on to the final stage where I'll ink it and then I'll color it. And then my process, because of the style that I kind of been trying to do specifically for Fantasy Flight. Because if you notice throughout my gallery, I typically draw the majority of my backgrounds, but for Fantasy Flight, I wanted to kind of bring a sort of animation slash comic style to it. So all my backgrounds are painted in all my cards I do for Fantasy Flight. All the cards have drawn characters and painted backgrounds, and I think that it's established a fun look for them, and
Yeah.
I'm glad they've enjoyed it enough to keep me on this long to drawing more and more cards with them. Yeah.
This is my own ignorance about the process, but how does like the pencil and inked and painted card like piece you make become card art? Like that's got to be digitalized or something, right? Or
Well, yeah, so it's just a digital file that you'd send. Like it'd be very similar to like, because everything right now is like, if I was to draw it traditionally, I'd still have to scan it and then take it into Clip Studio or Photoshop to color it.
I see. Okay.
And then it would still end up being a digital file that you send to them. Then they put their card template on it, send it to the people who print the cards and such, and then they print and cut the cards accordingly. I'm sure there's like a whole sheet of cards that they print off, and then those cards all have to get cut. There's a whole production process on like, how things are made and such. So yeah.
When you say it's painted, you have acrylics on canvas, or is it a digital paint that you're doing?
Digital, yeah, digital paint. Like
Okay.
so like if you notice the backgrounds don't really have any line art or anything on them, they're much more just like actually just painted digitally in the back, and then the characters all are like, comic looking, so they're all line art based. They're not painted as much. So
Now, with some of these characters, like say, if we go back to the Gamora fighting Nebula, do they tell you anything additional, like they give you reference time period? We want their outfits to be this version, or do you have some freedom there to be like, I like Thor when he has the chest plate, or I want Thor's helmet to have the big wings, or whatever it might be. I know you don't have any Thor, but hopefully that makes sense.
Um, Usually, so if they have a set suit or look that they want, they'll send you that specific suit that they want for that card. If there is a card that has not yet been done yet for a set, they'll send you kind of multiple reference for it, and you kind of can make it in, like, at least in my experience, it's been like an amalgamation of those character, like those references, or it's very much like we want this specific look for the character. And sometimes, because if the reference is from multiple artists but it's the same suit, it's not always 100% consistent, so you try to find like what's the full consistent design, because not every design had like some artists designed those characters on the page. There's not like a character design sheet for for some of the characters. So typically, though, if it's a character that has a very known and iconic look, we try to stick very closely to what it is they send us for as far as character reference. So yeah,
Okay. They'll say like, we want Iron Man Mark IV armor, not the Mark VII armor, or something like that.
pretty much.
Yeah.
They don't
Okay.
send me like a whole number of armors and go, okay, pick one. No, they're very like much like, yeah, do this armor.
From a creative standpoint, then Joey, is like the fact that you're creating for such an established IP, is it liberating or is it limiting insofar as like your options and such? Or is the fact that, well, Iron Man is Iron Man and there's the iconic nature of Spider-Man as well, like that's actually liberating in that you have some of that look and that stuff already done for you, and now it's about action or storytelling or theme or something on the art. You know what I'm getting at here?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that like for me, um, because of the nature and how I've been working with the guys at FFG, um, every card is pretty liberating with how they do give me a lot of creative freedom
Awesome.
with what it is I'm drawing. Like even if it is like an established suit or character, it's more so about like, okay, now I have to take this character and really make it my own because I'm the one drawing this character now. It's not just the reference. Like, how do I take this character, make them in my style, and make them look as cool as I possibly can, like for
Mhm,
each of these
mhm.
cards. And so to me, it's a fun challenge of finding like the proper composition, like what's the best way to color this piece. And I actually have like I can't say what they are, but I have some upcoming pieces and stuff that I've done for FFG that I would say is probably some of my best stuff I've done for them, because I really wanted to push the quality of uh, of these cards up a lot, and I would say that that's been a fun challenge because I always love seeing like super high quality stuff, and when it comes to, you know, the restraints are kind of on more so on your level of creativity rather than like anything that they would put on you. Like if you can find cool creative ways to do draw a page or do a cover, or, draw a card or anything, then, it's going to make the character that you're drawing, look even cooler.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, those restraints and such work the same for like writing, right? For fiction
Hmm.
and things like that. Like being limited in certain ways actually adds to
Hmm.
adds to the creativity of what you're bringing to it because you can't just do whatever, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's awesome. Um, I have a question, Steve, that I don't know if you're able to send it back to when we were talking about inking and coloring and penciling.
We'll just
Um,
keep it going.
okay,
It's fine.
now it's so for the FFG stuff, it's all digital for you, right, Joey? But when you're
Hmm.
doing comic book art and such like that, you are penciling and inking and such, right?
Usually if it's a cover or something, if it's interior pages, I have kind of it's been a while since I've done a full traditional page. But I'm finding more recently that for certain pages I do plan on drawing them traditionally. Like I'll probably still do like the pencils digitally, and then I'll print it out
Oh,
and
I
such,
see.
and then ink over it traditionally. Because I like to just kind of clean it up very early on and on the computer and everything, and then I can just traditionally ink it, and then it'll come out as like the cleanest possible inks as I possibly can make it.
Cool. Yeah, I was explaining like that, there's inking, coloring, and penciling and all that in comic books to my daughter was interested to know. She's like, well, can you ask him like if he's just penciling, right? And this was when I told her that multiple people did these jobs. I'm like, a lot of times you'll pencil something and someone else will ink it, and then someone else. Her question was like, and back in the day when that might have been more like one part of the process than all of it, you have this image in your mind while you're penciling, and then it goes into other hands, and it comes out the other end. Like, how is it from what you imagined it would be? Or, do you have a lot of input in how it gets colored or inked after penciling? Like, how does that process work? I guess just in general with comic book artists, you or anyone, like how that works. And like when you pencil something and you see it in the colored and printed thing at the end, like, how do you feel about that? And like, is it come out the back end how you imagined it would?
It really depends kind of on who you're working with, because sometimes not every inker or colorist works well with certain artists.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
and it's not to say that any of those people are bad at doing certain things. It's more so that like certain colorists and certain inkers fit others better
Hmm.
sometimes. And so I've had some pages like so to kind of go back, I mainly was getting into inking myself very early on, and so anytime other people tend to ink my stuff, it's never quite to where I'd imagined or my liking. And it's not to say that any of those people are bad inkers by any means. It's just it's not always quite to how I would have done it, or like because I feel like I'm and this it sounds kind of bad, but it's like I'm very controlling of my art. I like to see it a particular way, and I have I have a very high standard for how I'd like things to look. And so if they're not quite to that standard, it's kind of like and you just feel like, oh man, I can't do anything about that. But typically I've been
Right.
fortunate enough to work with some really great colorists, and having been doing my own coloring for years, was it? I tend to go back through, and if I have any color notes, I usually will just do like a quick paint over or do something like just kind of like circle an area and like note like add more red here or change the background of this color, kind of
Mm.
general things. Like if people already know their lighting and all that stuff, like I don't really have to do much noting.
Interesting. Okay.
But I do tend to go back through and try to just make sure that the colors kind of, because at the end of the day, the colors are what's the final product. That's what's going out. So that has to look, as best as it can look. And so before they send it out, I'll typically go through, and thankfully my editors and other people actually agree with most of the noting that I make. So yeah.
You'd be like, her coat's supposed to be green. Why did you make it blue? Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I've caught stuff that editors haven't caught before, where I'm just like, "Hey, this isn't colored right. They need to go back and fix it." And they're like, "Oh, you're right, it's not." And I'm just like, "Yeah, I don't know. I need to catch that, but that's okay." I mean, they've got so many books they're working on, so that's typically a thing that happens. Sometimes certain things fall through the cracks where they're not. People don't always notice the little things, but because it's my art, I'll notice it.
Right. Can't find every typo, So
Yep.
trying to
Not
figure
until it's
out
published. As soon
until
as
you're
it
Yep.
like,
goes out
oh
the door, that's when
man,
you see it. Yep, there it
Yep.
is. I see it now. Yep.
Hmm.
the wrong your. Oh
Hmm. Yep.
yeah. Um, so what's the difference between inking and coloring? I'm sometimes confused by that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So inking is obviously like so back in the day, for the ability to reproduce the images on paper and everything, because they would basically have to darken the lines to a point to where they could be copied from I don't remember what kind of copy machines they had back then. Um, but the penciled lines weren't or dark enough to pick up, and so they would
Okay.
have to go in and ink them with with actual full inks, and usually they would ink with a brush or a quill, um, and that was to make sure that those things could be reproduced.
Gotcha.
But typically, inking is another form of art in itself, and it is a enhancement of the line art through line weights or feathering on things to kind of emphasize shadings at times, like filling in like the big dark areas we called like the filling in the blacks, like because
Yeah.
sometimes when
Okay.
ink like a penciler, I don't know if you guys have seen a penciled like comic page, but sometimes if there's a big wide open area and an artist had like put X marks in there, that means like to fill in that area with all black, like just fill it all in.
Okay.
And then coloring is like another form of its own practice where like, if you guys look back like early 90s and, older comics, they were all just one color. Flat colors throughout it. It wasn't like there wasn't a whole lot of lighting or rendering or anything like that. But
Mhm.
nowadays coloring is much more about, coloring up the pages and adding, lighting and patterns and different how would I describe it? Yeah, just making
Yeah, the
the
blending of the
world feel
hues and things, right? Like,
yep, making the
yeah.
world feel like come to life through color and
Mhm.
everything. So yeah.
So I'm looking at a card right now. Anna Marie. This is the alter ego of Rogue.
Mhm.
And the whole background is like this beautiful conglomerations of oranges.
Mhm.
Um, but yet you see her hair so perfectly in that, yet it's almost the same color. Kind of is that inking that does that, or is inking not really a thing that exists in a digital medium? But like
Ink
if this were a comic book page, um, would it be the inker who like makes that hair stand out like that?
it like making the graphic shapes of the hair and everything.
Yeah, just like how the hair pops, and even though it's kind of the similar color and like the shading of it, yeah, it's such
It's
a great piece. I absolutely love this piece and loved it since I first opened that pack. And I'm like, oh my god, that's a great card. Um,
thank you.
and yeah, and so I just like I'm looking at it, how that card is just so orange, right?
Oh
And
yeah. So that would all be within the colors and such. So
okay,
so inking is more just like the lines being black. That's inking. Like if the lines were more like gray tone or like feeling more penciled and such,
okay.
they would have kind of more of a subtle. They would be more in the
So
grays and
so that
such.
distinction gets a little bit less apparent in sort of the digital art that is the cards of our game, right?
hmm
Okay.
Yeah,
This
inking
looks
is
like a
just like the cleanup of the line art. Basically, it's
Okay.
making like the crisp, clean, like full line art. That's what inking is.
this feels
Okay.
like a good example of where you said you paint the background and then you line art the character. That Anna
Mhm.
Marie looks like, from what I can tell, that seems like a great example of what you were talking about.
Yep, yep. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll paint all that background and when you're studying color and such, typically like in sunsets, there's a lot of orange everywhere um and versus like, blue sky, like there's a lot of like the main natural colors. But if you look in shadows, like if you're coloring or if you study any kind of color, you'll notice that like when the sky is blue out and if you pay attention to the shadows, there's a lot of blue in the shadow. And so like especially if you look at stuff from like a distance, you'll notice that things that are in shadow kind of have a bluish hue to those shadows because of the light reflecting from the sky. And that kind of thing is true like with why like the shadows on Rogue on this piece are purple. It's just because like the sky up there is purple, and a lot of the light that's hitting her is the orange from the sun. Such so that's kind of different artistic things that I try to take into account when I'm like referencing like lighting and such.
Awesome.
Hope that explains that part. Yeah. So
Totally. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
On the same topic here, you've made cards for Marvel Champions, but you've also made the comic books for Marvel Champions.
Mhm,
And Mad Titan Shadow, you did the comic for that, it looks like. You did the
mhm,
comics for Sinister Motives, which was all Spider-Man themed. Mad Titan Shadow
mhm,
was like Thanos and stuff. Um, we recently talked with Tony Fanchi, one of the developers, who said he was really excited to write his first comic book, which was one of the the book for the next evolution, which you didn't work on, but was a more recent piece. Did you find working with these game developers who have never written comic books an interesting challenge? Where they could, how is that working with somebody who has never written a comic book compared to the guys who are writing comic books and now you're doing the art for them? Was there a similarity, differences, new challenges?
I would say that how they wrote the comics was, pretty similar, like script format to like how comic books are written. Um, Typically, I think there's one thing that that I try to pay attention to, and sometimes people who aren't used to draw or writing comics, they don't know this just because they haven't. It's sometimes having multiple things happen in one panel, and sometimes I would have to like explain, like, for comics you can't have always multiple things because sometimes certain things need to be broken up throughout multiple panels. So in storytelling, like if you have and sometimes it works for dialogue as well. Like sometimes if you're drawing a comic book and somebody's saying something and then they're reacting to something else. Typically, what I would do is I would add another panel to where they've said their bit of dialogue to this person in this panel, but now they're reacting to something off panel. So I'm going to add a panel, and usually, like the writers will actually be happy that I did that because it helps emphasize and sell the next line of dialogue a little bit more and help guide the page along a little bit better. So that's something that just comes with experience in working in comics. Is you have to learn how to be able to adapt certain things in the script or add and take away little things. And if they're willing, if they trust you to do the work, then you can uh you know just say, hey, we should probably add this in there, and they're like, oh, you know what, that makes sense. Okay. So they're pretty agreeable when it comes to stuff that I suggest because of my background of working in comics for several years. So
Now, a lot of comics, at least newer ones, you have a lot of characters busting out of frames or odd shaped frames, or what a scene that goes over multiple pages. Do you get to decide some of that? Is somebody else telling you that we're going to do that? We want Loki's horns. He's in the bottom of the page, but we want his horns to hit the frame above us. Like, is that up to you? How's that
yeah,
decision come made?
yeah, pretty much anytime characters are popping in and out of frames, like that's all my decision and such. So it's all like I was saying earlier, like it's all about creating a very cool graphic thing, but it also has to make sense. So you don't just want everybody popping out of frames or different things like that. It's choosing those moments, like if it makes sense to do it. Like I have a frame where like Thanos's head is like sticking above the frame. Well, it makes sense because that's the next frame you're gonna look at. So his frame is bleeding over into the first panel because you're already going to be looking at the second panel. And it also helps kind of emphasize like his presence in that next frame and kind of the character of him. And then like the same with Loki being in the frame that's popping out is like we want to emphasize Loki is like, the primary focus of this frame, and he's the next panel you're going to be looking at. So every page I usually tell people comes with an element of graphic design to where it needs to make sense with why you're having that character pop out of frame. It's not just for the sake of I want to have this character pop out of frame. It's like I usually try to tie it to a story point where it's either going to guide the reader's eye to the next panel or it's kind of like that money shot panel. So I really try to emphasize those. Like if it's and especially if you're wanting to give the readers something exciting to look at as well. Like there's a page where I think you guys can probably see that, like where Gamora is running out of the panel. Like she's like this one whole figure running out of the panel, and that was something that made sense to do because she's linked across the next few panels. So it's just kind of being conscious of those things when it comes to storytelling.
So cool. Okay.
It really is. And it's like, I think about too, like, well, whose decision is it, like, where the words go? And like, is that paged out beforehand? Like on page 17, we're going to have these four bubbles.
Yeah.
And that's like,
Usually
and that's the
I'll
writer's decision. That's an artist? It's kind of collaborative. It's
I'll
what?
usually be the one to establish where the word bubbles go
Okay,
because it like early on it kind of helps the composition of the page. Like if I'm already establishing that early
I
on, the
see. Okay,
letterer is not always having to figure that out. And sometimes like, if you're working with letterers, like for example, like mainly in the comic books, there's a lot of really, you know, uh letterers who've been there for a very long time who are veteran letterers, so they understand like where's the best positioning for certain word balloons and such. But you also want to make sure you're conscious of that when you are doing storytelling, because you don't want to fill up a page or a panel so much that there's no room for the letters. So you have to be conscious of that when you
right,
are
right.
telling a story, and you have to give like room for that. And the other part to be conscious of is like, hey, if there's a lot of dialogue here, I shouldn't maybe spend as much time on this background because it's all going to get covered up by the letters.
Right,
So
right, right.
it's
Like
being conscious of
I,
those moments.
did this great piece of Star Lord, and they put the bubble right over his face.
Yep, pretty much. Yep, basically.
Yeah,
So
that'll shut him up.
yeah, it's being very conscious of that because there's a lot of I remember when I was first starting out and like even seeing like other younger artists, like people just they're not always being conscious, and sometimes the word balloons are bleeding over into other panels when they shouldn't, and they should be able to remain in their panels. So it's solving all those problems early on in the sketch phase though.
Fantastic.
Okay, so we've seen the art on the cards. There's a ton of great stuff. Folks can go and check out your art on all the different pages, and even our Marvel CDB. You can search by artist, and you can see all of Joey's stuff. But Joey, is there a Marvel character that you have not got to do that you would like to do, either in the game or in a comic, like something more than just for yourself, say?
Ooh, one that I have not gotten to do. It's kind of crazy. I've drawn a lot of the Marvel characters, but like not in the comics. Um, a character I think that would be enjoyable to do some cool stuff with, especially like page composition wise and interesting storytelling stuff is Daredevil. I would really
Okay.
like to do some cool stuff with him. An actual comic. I'm trying to think like I mean I obviously love Spider-Man. I would love to do more Spider-Man. Any chance I get, I'm like, yeah, give me some more Spider-Man. He's my favorite. Um
Well, we don't
uh
have Daredevil in the game, so maybe you can petition FFG to do a Daredevil so you can draw the Daredevil, because I know the community's been clamoring for a Daredevil in our game, but we just don't have him yet. So
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some of the other characters because there's like not a whole lot of like obscure characters that I think of. I would definitely love to draw, like a lot of the X-Force stuff, like Deadpool and Cable and Domino. Like I would love to get to do an X-Force book. That would be super duper fun because a lot of that stuff, like growing up as a kid, like seeing the X-Force stuff, I uh I just loved that stuff. So that would be something that I'd really enjoy. Any of the or having the chance to create any kind of new mutants or anything like that, I think that would be really fun.
Mhm.
Um, well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but like I've been fortunate enough to work on like a large swath of Marvel characters, which is kind of like crazy to me how many I've worked on now at this point. But yeah, ideally, if there was something I would say, specifically for Marvel Comics, I would love to do a Daredevil something. Ghost Rider would be interesting. That one would be fun.
Daniel, I think you had a question about an interesting character he did.
Oh yeah, I was super interested, Joey. I was looking through your art and instantly drawn to Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer.
Oh, no worries. I mean, like it was a fun book, like to work on. The for those who are wondering, the Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer stuff. Those who've been following my artwork, like they know they've seen that book. I've only had a handful of people actually bring that up to me at shows, and Comic Cons, which is really funny. I recently had the newer publisher send me some of the newer copies of it. More recently, I'm like, wow, this is all the way from 2017. But yeah, it was. it was a book I did back then with the writer David Crownson, and I just did one issue of it, and people really liked it. And I remember him telling me that I don't know if it's announced or not or anything. I don't know, but I don't know if it was being optioned for a TV show or something like that. Because it done pretty well for him, I imagine. So, but he has other people working on it and such. And I had a buddy of mine, or a few buddies of mine, I think, do some variant covers for his later issues. So yeah.
Harriet Tubman, Demon Slayer, unrelated, Abraham Lincoln, zombie killer.
Or Abraham
George,
Lincoln vampires.
yeah, okay. But is there like George Washington werewolf hunter?
I don't know.
There should
I'm
be.
sure. I'm sure somebody will come up with that one.
Historical figure, mythological monster. Go right.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure that they have a number of those types of books. I mean, there's if you can't find a comic for you out there, I don't know what to tell you. There's a comic for everyone out there. I'll tell you that. So there's definitely something. If you cannot find a comic that you're like, you know what, I want this very obscure thing. It's out there, either in the American comic books or in manga somewhere.
So all these art questions have been great, but I want to know: do you actually play Marvel Champions?
I do not, which, having worked on the game for 5 years, you'd think I would have, but no.
Well, that's okay. So we have some silly questions coming up. So these will be generic silly questions instead of game focused, I guess. Then we always here at Critical Encounters, we like to look at the villains through a new lens, right? They're poorly understood. So those so-called heroes, we like to see sometimes we like to see when they lose, they get their butts kicked, they might get thrashed. Do you have a hero out there in the Marvel universe that you just love watching get beat up by the villains?
I mean, it's funny because he is my favorite. He always does get beat up by the villains. Is Spider-Man. He gets his crap
webs handed
rocked,
to him.
Yeah, he gets his webs handed to him. And not just by the villains, like just life. Life rocks Peter's world every freaking time. And but that's typically the life of somebody who's, has two identities and trying to balance those. I'm trying to think. A funny one would be Squirrel Girl, just because, like, people would laugh at whenever I mentioned that. I used to have what is it? I don't know if you guys know what Periscope is, but I used to stream some of my drawings, and anytime people would ask me, like, what's my least favorite character, I would say Squirrel Girl, and some people would be like upset, and other people would laugh. And so I was like, yeah, I love it when she gets beat up or some other funny thing, and it was like not any like true animosity towards the character. It's just like, yeah, it's just the worst.
She's the absolute best ally in the game.
She's a really good card in this game. Yeah.
That's the funniest part about it. So, like, yeah, I'll just usually just throw, shade her way. I'm trying to think of my other, what's a character I do enjoy watching get beat up. Not a Marvel character, but Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern. Just because he's always portrayed as kind of a jerk in either the comics, or I don't know if he's in animation, but and I'm trying to think of another character who usually gets rocked because of his fat mouth. And I mean, Deadpool's always funny to see get beat up because of how he reacts. Like, I mean, he'll get his arm ripped off, he'll get like chopped in half, different crazy things that happen to Deadpool because of his healing factor. Like, he just like he'll lay on top of a bunch of barrels of gasoline and blow himself up. Or I don't remember which book he is like taking all this Semtex together and making it into a chair. But yeah, he's always hilarious to see get beat up. Wolverine, for sure, because there's like a issue in the comics where he gets ripped in half by the Hulk and has to climb up a mountain to get his legs back. So,
I know
yeah.
they can heal, but they must feel pain. I don't know. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. He
Okay.
definitely feels pain. Yeah. There's this whole double page spread of him getting ripped in half by the Hulk. So,
Wow. Well, since we love villains so much, which villain do you like to see doing all this thrashing? Who's your favorite?
um, so probably one of my all-time favorite villains, like especially in Marvel, and I actually drew him in a issue of Fantastic Four, is Doctor Doom.
Mm.
I love Doctor Doom. He is one of the coolest villains, I would say, in the comics universe. And I don't know if you guys ever read the newer Secret Wars stuff, but in that book, Doctor Doom freaking rips out Thanos' spine like the Predator.
I think I
Wow.
missed that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's at a point where Thanos is standing against him, and he just punches a hole through Thanos and rips out his spine. And uh, basically, I think Doom had become like as powerful as a god, basically in that universe or in that storyline. So yeah, him, Magneto for sure. I love Magneto. Venom is definitely another favorite, obviously just because growing up, that's a character that just looked so cool. And Venom, I'm sure, could rip Wolverine in half, or or
Right.
Deadpool. So yeah, because he's a giant monster, So yeah, for sure, those guys.
So here in the layer we have so some of us are villains, but some of us are minions. We have our minions. Um, do you have a part of your job that you would just love to have some evil minions go and do for you? Whatever it might be, some tedious thing, some esoteric thing. Like we have minions do all sorts of stuff for us. Do you have something you would love to have our evil minions go out there and do for you to make your job easier?
Sometimes I think to myself when I'm having a day that I just don't want to do anything, I would really like some evil minions to just draw these pages for me or draw these cards, and then I still get paid and take the credit for it all. Um, but there are certain parts of my job where, like, so for when you're coloring, there's a part of coloring that's called flatting, which is just basically laying in all the base colors on the characters, and sometimes it can be a little tedious, and a little time consuming depending on how many characters you have on a page to do that. And so, or drawing my backgrounds, I would say that I would have my evil minions or the evil minions you guys have draw all my backgrounds so I can just focus on the characters. But I would uh I would also just make sure that I'm still able to take all the credit for that too.
Okay. No guarantee that any of these evil minions
Brilliant.
have an artistic bone in their body, but we can put them to work for you. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Having the evil minions would be great.
So now you yourself, Joey, would you consider yourself a hero or villain? I ask this because you seem to take particular delight in describing the damage to Wolverine and Deadpool. So, but a day-to-day walkabout, heroic villainous, what would you say?
Um, I I would like to view myself more as a hero and such. I think most people would. I think the oddity of that, and I'm sure you've heard the quote of like most villains see themselves as the hero in their stories. So, um, I would say that it depends on the day. I think some days I feel like I'm a hero, and some days I feel like I'm a villain. And
That's
um,
fair. That's fair.
it's an interesting paradox that most people share. It's like I'm not fully good, but I'm not fully bad either. Maybe I'm an anti-hero, maybe I'm neither of those things. But I would like to say I'm a hero.
That just made me wonder. So there are heroes, there are villains, there are anti-heroes. Are there anti-villains? Anti-villains?
I would say
That's
so.
not
I'd say like you would have people who defected from being villains to choose to be good, and you have a number of those. Like for a time, I would say Doc Ock became an anti-villain when he became the Superior Spider-Man,
okay. Yeah.
or
It's just a
same
term
with
you don't hear.
yeah, yeah, yeah. and I mean, or I would
Magneto,
say, or
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. And then an anti-hero, like, or anti-hero versus like an anti-villain.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think if there is anybody who could be considered really an anti-villain, in like a broader sense, because like you look at like the villains who have like reformed and like heroes who have turned evil, you know. Trying to think of some of the best cases though of that. I mean, most of them are always classified as anti-hero. You know, like Black Cat's kind of an anti-hero, Deadpool's an anti-hero. Wolverine kind of skirts the line of that. Magneto later down the line kind of becomes that.
Yeah.
Uh
I think
oh
Daniel, I think
man.
it's the hero bias in the general comic community that we don't hear about
Yeah, it
anti-villains.
seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, so you're a hero most of the time. You know, maybe you're an anti-hero from time to time. So the Infinity Gauntlet drops into your lap. Do you use it for good? Use it for ill? What's the first thing you snap?
I know most people would probably say I would just double the resources of everything. Um, because if
Not as
you
good as
have,
the story, though. Yeah.
yeah, like, that creates a rotten story. To me, it's kind of an interesting answer where it's like, if you have something called the Infinity Gauntlet, you could just make infinite of everything, because you have the power to warp reality, shape time and minds and power and all those different things. And so I would like to think of my use of it as a use for good, um, because that would be my choice. I think I would use it and then destroy it so nobody else could use it, and
Okay.
make it so they can't go back in time and reuse it. I would destroy
Use
it
it.
throughout all time. I would go back. I would make sure when I snap, it's destroyed from any point after the point of which I've destroyed it, or after or before. It only exists within the reality upon the single moment of one which I destroyed it, so it can no longer be used by anyone or anything.
The time stuff gets complicated. You you end up being your own grandfather. It's crazy.
Mhm.
So yeah,
That's
we're all grateful for you destroying it.
yeah.
Cheers.
So we don't have to think about it. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if everybody's pursuit is to have the Infinity Gauntlet, and you're just like, well, you can't have it anymore. Nobody can. But it's funny though, because if you destroy it, the other part is like those stones all were like what shaped reality in that universe, so to speak. So you wonder if destroying it, does destroying it actually destroy the universe? I don't know.
Well,
Oh,
see, that's why I
geez.
would just use it to make unlimited tacos for myself, and that's that. So then yeah, I don't have to think about those deep
That's true. I probably
topics.
am thinking way too deep about it. I'd probably be
Mhm.
like, you know what? I'm gonna use the Infinity Gauntlet, make everybody superheroes. Everybody's got superpowers. Everybody,
Yeah,
and
something fun.
I would say that like everybody is so you know how like in the Looney Tunes cartoons where like people are there's a lot of violence that happens, but nobody really actually gets hurt or dies in the Looney Tunes. It's just like people have anvils dropped on them and everything, and nothing. Everybody's kind of invincible.
Yep.
But they also, if somebody's done something, you're just like, I'm gonna drop a piano on you, and I'm really upset about what you did, or I'm gonna say it's rabbit season or duck season, and have Elmer Fudd shoot you in the face, and you'll just have like the black powder look on your face
Oh
after
god.
having it go off. So
Yeah.
just have it to where we can have all the superhero kind of level of action, but nobody really gets hurt. We just get to all have a lot of fun.
Wow.
So
Steve, that might be the greatest answer to end on.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good.
So, Joey, let's say you have your own comic run. Who would be your nemesis? And you, as the hero in your comic run, would you be kind of the lone wolf type? Would you be part of a group? And if you are part of a group, which one would you want to be a part
ooh, the Nemesis. Trying to think. I mean, I already said Doctor Doom would be pretty awesome to go up against. Maybe Apocalypse. Um, somebody, some big giant threat. But yeah, those two would be fun. Maybe both of them. I don't know.
of?
Um,
Both of
uh,
them. That's It's
I
some
know, right?
lofty goals. Okay.
Heighten the stakes. I mean, you
Yeah.
have victory over two of the most powerful characters that are, villains in the Marvel universe. Then, what does that say about you as a hero? You know, it's like, oh man, I took out two of the most powerful guys in the universe over here. So, but as far as a team, like, would I be a lone wolf or would I be a part of a group? I definitely feel like a group, myself in a group, would have to take them on. Um, I'd like to think of myself I feel like I'd kind of be part lone wolf, but part of the group, like, so to speak. Like, I wouldn't, like, I'd be useful to the group, but I'm maybe like somewhat not always a part of the group until like later. I don't know.
Understood. Understood. Yep.
But definitely the X-Men. I think that having the X-Men would be the fun group to be a part of. Because you got all sorts of kind of crazy people on there.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to think though. Was I supposed to also pick a character that I'm supposed to be, or am I just? It's just
No,
me.
it's
I'm on
you.
there.
It's just you.
Okay.
It's your comic run. Yeah. I think we've had somebody say their nemesis was like their best friend from college. That kind of thing. Yeah. So.
Actually, you know who my nemesis is? If we're just picking, something, my nemesis is a copy of me, and he's all the parts of myself that I don't like. And
Ooh, the evil clone.
He's the
Yeah.
evil clone of me, but he's actually just me. I'm my own worst enemy, and I have to go defeat my own worst enemy.
Wow.
That's my ultimate
good one.
nemesis.
Yep. All right. Well, that's the show. We have talked a lot.
It's so great having you here, Joey.
Yeah. Thank you for all the
Thank
insights into what goes into making the art and how it is like working with FFG, doing comics. It was very insightful. I love talking to you. This was great.
Yeah,
Super.
for sure. Thank you guys for having me on. It's always a ton of fun to, talk all this stuff and any of the silly questions. I love the silly questions. You guys have great questions on there.
All Steve. Now, if folks wanted to ask more questions about art, maybe Steve. Now I feel like you and we can answer anything, right? Joey's illuminated us to the point where I think we're experts. So if
that's
folks
all it takes.
All it takes like an hour and change with it.
Yep.
With
everything now.
With a brilliant artist.
You guys don't need me.
Joey, we're gonna link all your different social things, DeviantArt, ArtStation, like that. But do you have anything out there coming up that you want people to know about that we can plug for you, that they can say, oh, I want to go see Joey's stuff? Now's your chance. You got anything you want to tell? Shameful self-promotion. Go.
Yes, season 3 of What If is now fully on Disney Plus. All the episodes are on there now. I got to have the pleasure of working on that show for the past few years, and then I also have a new DC book coming out, I believe, in February. It is the JSA number 4. I will see if I can link that somewhere, but yeah, that comes out. And then be on the lookout for more fun new card art from me, from FFG.
Yes.
I think that'll be, I don't know when that's going to be announced, but yeah, we'll have some more fun stuff for you guys coming out soon. So
right on.
And What If is great. I have 1 episode left, and when we're done here, I'm going to go watch it. So
awesome.
It's been great. And now that I know you've worked on it, I'm like going to watch for the styles. So yeah.
Oh yeah. There's 2 pieces that I did on the end of the episode. That's the one you're gonna watch, and it's oh man, I don't even. It's the first 2 pieces you'll see at the very end. Like there's like a montage sequence, but it's the first 2 pieces that I did. I won't spoil it for if you haven't seen it, so you don't know who it is.
Okay, first 2 pieces, eyes open, everybody. First 2 pieces, no spoilers, but yeah, good. Thank you.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. So if you have those art questions, you can email us at criticalencounterspod@gmail.com. We are Critical Encounters on Facebook. You can find our YouTube, Twitch, or Patreon by searching for Critical Encounters Podcast. And on Discord, we are Vardane, Big Foam Loaf, and Wandering Took. If you like our show, tell your friends. If you don't like our show, tell your enemies. Thanos, take us out.
spread it, run from it. Destiny still arrives all the same.
Well, that was fantastic. Thank you so
Dude.
much.
That was so great.
Awesome. Yeah,
Oh my
thank you guys
goodness.
for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys, I hope the listeners and everybody has a lot of fun listening to it too.
Oh, I think this will be one of our most
Yeah, we'll get a bump in listeners from this stuff. It'll be great.
100%.
Awesome.